Maya had always believed in the sanctity of boundaries. She was 27 with a carefully curated life, an engagement to a man she'd known since college, and a career that had taken off faster than she'd expected. Everything seemed to be moving forward exactly as it should. The future felt solid, predictable, and safe. Until she met Ethan. It was a work event, one she had almost skipped but attended out of obligation. Ethan was a renowned architect, the keynote speaker of the night. He was captivating, charismatic, and in his mid-40s, almost twice her age. There was something about him that drew people in, a quiet confidence that came not from arrogance but from experience. He spoke about architecture like it was poetry, his deep voice weaving the complexities of design with stories of his projects around the world. By the time he finished, the entire room was captivated. Maya had never been one to be starstruck, but something about him lingered in her thoughts. She didn't expect anything more than that. An intriguing encounter with someone she'd probably never see again. That night, as the event wrapped up, she found herself lingering by the bar, nursing a glass of wine as the crowd thinned. She was lost in thought, reflecting on Ethan's speech, when a voice interrupted her. Thinking about running off to Italy and designing villas? Maya looked up, startled, to find Ethan standing beside her, a warm smile on his lips. His presence was commanding, even though he seemed completely at ease. She laughed softly, her heart skipping a beat. "Something like that," she replied, trying to keep her composure. "You make it sound like a dream." "That's because it is," he said, leaning against the bar. "But dreams can become reality if you're willing to take the risk." There was something in the way he said it that made her pulse quicken. It wasn't just about architecture. There was a deeper meaning, a challenge in his words. She could feel the unspoken tension between them, something that both excited and terrified her. The conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about their careers, their passions, their views on the world. Maya was surprised at how easy it was to open up to him. He was older, yes, but it wasn't the age gap that made her nervous. It was the way he looked at her, like he could see through all her carefully constructed walls. There was something magnetic about him, something she couldn't ignore. As the night wore on, Maya realized she didn't want it to end. But she had a fiancé, Tom, steady and reliable Tom, waiting for her at home. She couldn't let herself get swept away in the allure of someone like Ethan. It was reckless, dangerous, and she wasn't that kind of person. "I should get going," she said, standing abruptly and breaking the spell. "It was really nice talking to you." Ethan's eyes held hers for a moment, searching, as if he knew what she was trying to run from. He didn't try to stop her, but his next words were enough to shake her resolve. "Sometimes the things we run from are exactly what we need." Maya's breath hitched, but she forced a smile, muttering a quick goodbye before practically fleeing the room. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she stepped into the cool night air, her mind racing. What was she doing? She was engaged. She had a life with Tom. She couldn't let herself be swayed by a man she just met, no matter how intoxicating he was. But even as she told herself that, Ethan lingered in her thoughts. Days passed, and Maya tried to push the encounter from her mind. She focused on work, on wedding plans, on the routine of her life with Tom. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the memory of Ethan. The way he'd looked at her, the quiet confidence in his voice, the way he'd made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. And then, as if fate had conspired against her, she received an email. It was from Ethan. He'd gotten her contact information from a mutual colleague under the guise of a work collaboration. But the message was brief, personal, and to the point. "Let's have coffee. I think there's more we need to talk about." Maya stared at the screen, her heart racing. She knew what he meant. This wasn't about work, and they both knew it. She should ignore it, delete the email, and pretend like nothing had ever happened. But her fingers moved on their own, typing out a simple response. "Okay." When they met at the cafe a few days later, the tension between them was palpable. Maya had told herself she was only meeting him to put an end to whatever this was. But the moment she saw him, her resolve crumbled. They talked for hours, their conversation as effortless as it had been the first time. But there was something more now. An unspoken understanding, a mutual pull they could no longer deny. Ethan's gaze was intense, and Maya found herself drawn to him in a way that terrified her. She knew she should stop this before it went any further, but she couldn't. As they left the cafe, Ethan walked her to her car. They stood there for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. Maya's heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the heat of his body next to hers. She wanted him. God, she wanted him. And the thought scared her more than anything. Maya, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Tell me to stop and I will. She didn't say a word. Instead, she closed the distance between them, her lips crashing against his in a kiss that was filled with all the pent-up desire she had been trying to ignore. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and for a moment everything else faded away. There was no Tom, no engagement, no consequences, just the two of them lost in the intensity of the moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, reality came crashing back down. Maya stared at Ethan, her heart racing, the weight of what she had just done sinking in. I have to go, she stammered, turning away before he could say anything. She drove home in a daze, her mind racing with guilt and confusion. What was she doing? She loved Tom, didn't she? But the way Ethan made her feel, she had never felt that way before. It was like he had awakened something in her, something she hadn't even known was missing. For the next few weeks, Maya was torn between two worlds. On one hand, there was Tom, the man she had built a life with, the man who was safe, dependable, and everything she thought she wanted. On the other hand, there was Ethan, the man who ignited a fire in her, who made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. The affair continued in secret, each stolen moment with Ethan more intense than the last. They met in hidden places, their encounters filled with a passion that left Maya breathless and aching for more. But with each intimate moment, the guilt grew stronger. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't stop. She didn't want to. Tom began to notice the distance between them. He asked if something was wrong, if she was stressed about the wedding. Maya lied, saying everything was fine, but inside she was falling apart. She felt trapped in her own lies, caught between the man she had promised to spend her life with, and the man who had turned her world upside down. One evening, after another rendezvous with Ethan, Maya returned home to find Tom waiting for her. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a pain that sent a chill down her spine. "We need to talk," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya's heart sank. She knew what was coming. She had been careless, too wrapped up in her affair with Ethan to see the cracks forming in her relationship with Tom. And now everything was about to come crashing down. "I know," Tom said, his voice breaking. "I know about him." Maya's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing. How had he found out? She had been so careful, hadn't she? Tom's eyes filled with tears, and the sight of his pain shattered her. He didn't yell, didn't accuse her. He simply asked one question. Why? It was a question Maya couldn't answer. She didn't know why. She didn't know how she had let things get this far. All she knew was that her heart was torn in two. And no matter what she did, someone was going to get hurt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. Tom moved out, leaving Maya alone in the apartment they had shared for years. The silence was deafening, and the weight of her guilt was suffocating. Maya sat in the stillness of her apartment, the weight of her choices pressing down on her like a heavy fog. Tom was gone, and the reality of what she had done had finally sunk in. The emptiness was overwhelming, and every corner of the apartment was a reminder of the life she had shattered. It felt like her heart had been ripped in two, but instead of mending, the wound grew deeper with every passing day. Ethan reached out to her, of course. He hadn't heard from her since that night with Tom, and he was worried, confused. Maya didn't know how to explain what was happening to him. She didn't even know how to explain it to herself. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now everything felt tainted. She met Ethan a few days later at his apartment. The moment she walked in, the tension in the air was palpable. Ethan reached for her, pulling her into his arms, and for a fleeting moment, Maya let herself melt into him, seeking the comfort she desperately craved. His warmth, the familiarity of his touch, it was all she had left now. But as their lips met, she felt a wave of guilt crash over her. She pulled back, her breath shaky. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's eyes searched hers, confused and hurt. Maya, what are you talking about? I thought we were. I don't know what we are. She cut him off, stepping back. Everything's a mess, Ethan. I've destroyed my life, my relationship with Tom, and I don't even know if I can fix it. And you're part of that destruction. Ethan looked at her, the weight of her words hanging between them. Do you regret it? He asked softly. Maya's throat tightened. Did she? Part of her did, of course. She regretted the pain she had caused, the betrayal she had inflicted on Tom. But when it came to Ethan, she didn't know. What they had shared had been real, passionate, and intoxicating. But it had also been dangerous and fleeting. I don't regret the way you made me feel, she admitted, her voice trembling. But I regret what it cost me. Ethan's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I need time, she said, her voice firm. I need to figure out what I want, who I am without all of this. I've been running from myself, and I can't keep doing that. Ethan nodded, though the pain in his eyes was clear. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. Maya felt her heart twist, but she knew what had to be done. You never really had me, Ethan. Not completely. I've been living two lives, and now I have to face the consequences of that. I can't keep running to you every time things get hard. He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. They both knew that their relationship had been built on fragile foundations, and now those foundations were crumbling. I'm sorry, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan nodded, his eyes full of unsaid words. Me too. Maya left his apartment that day with a heavy heart, knowing that it was the last time she would see him. As much as she had felt alive with him, she knew it was a life she couldn't sustain. She had to figure out who she was on her own without Tom, without Ethan. She had to face herself, and that terrified her. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Maya's life. She buried herself in work, trying to distract herself from the gnawing emptiness inside. Every time she passed the places where she and Ethan had met, her heart ached with the memory of their stolen moments. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Maya began to heal. She went to therapy, confronting the emotional walls she had built around herself. She learned to sit with the discomfort, to face the pain instead of running from it. Slowly, she began to understand the reasons behind her choices, the loneliness she had buried deep inside, the fear of being stuck in a life that no longer fit her. Ethan had been an escape, a way to feel alive again. But she realized that the passion she had sought outside herself was something she needed to find within. One evening, months after everything had fallen apart, Maya received a text from Tom. It was brief, simple. Can we talk? Her heart raced as she stared at the message. They hadn't spoken since he had moved out, both needing space to heal in their own ways. She didn't know if she was ready to face him, but she owed him the conversation they never had. They met at a quiet cafe, the same place where they had shared countless dates over the years. The familiarity of it was comforting, but also a painful reminder of what they had lost. Tom looked different, more tired, more guarded. But there was a softness in his eyes that made Maya's heart ache. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Tom began, his voice steady. About everything. About us. Maya nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. She didn't know what to say, so she waited. I know what happened between us wasn't just about Ethan, Tom continued, his eyes meeting hers. It was about more than that. We lost each other a long time ago, Maya. We stopped talking, stopped connecting. I didn't see it until it was too late. Tears welled in Maya's eyes and she blinked them away. I'm so sorry, Tom. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, he said gently. And I'm not blameless either. I didn't fight for us when I should have. I let things fall apart. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. There was so much they hadn't said to each other, so much pain that had been buried beneath the surface for years. Do you think we can fix this? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom was quiet for a long time before he answered. I don't know, he admitted, but I think we owe it to ourselves to try. Hope flickered in Maya's chest, but it was fragile, tentative. She had hurt Tom deeply, and she knew that healing wouldn't come easily. But maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. They started slow, rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when Maya wondered if they would ever be able to fully repair the damage. But as they spent more time together, talking openly and honestly for the first time in years, something shifted. They weren't the same people they had been before. Their relationship had changed, and so had they. But maybe that was okay. Maybe they could find a new way forward, a way that was more honest, more real. Maya never saw Ethan again, though she thought about him from time to time. She wondered if he had moved on, if he had found someone who could give him the kind of love she couldn't. She hoped he had. But as much as their affair had shaken her to her core, she knew that it was a chapter of her life that had to end. Months later, as Maya and Tom sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset, she realized something she hadn't before. Life wasn't about running from pain or chasing after fleeting moments of passion. It was about facing the hard truths, the difficult decisions, and choosing to grow from them. It was about finding the strength to stay even when things got hard. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt at peace. She had made mistakes, big ones, but those mistakes had led her to a deeper understanding of herself and the kind of love she wanted to build. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was real, and that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya reached for Tom's hand, squeezing it gently. He looked at her, and in that moment she knew they would be okay. They would keep moving forward together one day at a time, and that was all they needed.